Right now, I am standing in Plaza de Mayo in the very heart and center of Buenos Aires, the capital and by far largest city of the South American country of Argentina. Argentina, actually it was here in 1536. The European settlement of what would become Argentina first began. Though the initial European settlement in 1536 would fail, there wasn't enough Europeans and there were constant Amerindian attacks. It would finally be permanently settled in 1580 and would become what is today one of the largest metro areas, one of the largest cities in the entirety of the Western Hemisphere. Some 16 million people live here in Buenos Aires and the surrounding metropolitan area. Behind me is the pink house, the Casa Rosado. That is the presidential palace, the White House of Argentina. Though it is not the residence of Argentina's president, that is way out there, like 20 miles to the north in a very fancy neighborhood. But that is the official office. And it is a place where a lot of political groups will come down and protest. You might hear all the noise, you might see some of the flags waving in the background, the balls bouncing. That is because tomorrow is actually a holiday here in Argentina. It's the Day of Memory. That's when the Argentines remember the military junta that ruled the country in, I do believe, the 70s and going a little bit into the 80s. And they killed thousands of dissidents. They would oftentimes inject them with kind of a tranquilizer of sorts, and then they throw them out of a helicopter into the ocean. And then the mothers would go, well, where's my child? And of course, the military wouldn't tell them, and so they would go and they would march around that platform right there. Which bears on top of it kind of the national personification of Argentina. I forget her name, but like in the United States we have Colombia, which is the figure on top of the Capitol building. It's the Statue of Liberty. Argentina has a similar figure, like Britannia in Britain, or Germania in Germany, or Hibernia in Ireland. They have that figure there. So the mothers would walk around it kind of all day long as a kind of symbol of, or an act of quiet protest. And so anyway, they're having like a little concert, as kind of preparations for tomorrow's festivities. But anyway, yeah, so this is where Argentina really began, right here in this plaza. Though Argentina was first discovered actually by Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian explorer, slaver, conqueror, for which the Americas are actually named. The name Amerigo was Latinized by a German cartographer to America, and that is where we got the word America. And so that's why it's kind of a little bit silly and actually, honestly, quite offensive when you refer to Amerindians, whether it be Mapuche or Cherokee or Lakota or Aztecs as quote-unquote Native Americans, because Amerigo Vespucci, not only was he famous for exploration, but he also killed and enslaved a lot of Amerindians. So it's kind of offensive to call them that. But anyway, I digress. So Amerigo Vespucci, first European to discover this area, but then about 30 years later, I think he discovers it for the Europeans, I think in about 1508. But then in 1536, first European settlement here. Then the city is abandoned and it's refounded by Spaniards from Asuncion, which is now the capital of Paraguay, who come down here in 1580. So we have the pink house there. Now we'll come over here. We'll move over to another part of the square. We'll walk over here to this other part of the square. This right behind me here is the Metropolitan Cathedral of Buenos Aires. This is the most important Catholic cathedral in not only Buenos Aires, but the entire country. In fact, this is where the current Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, this is where he was a bishop before he was elected by the College of Cardinals to become the current Pope. In fact, his name, he adopted Pope Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, which is the saint that he admires most, or at least one of the saints that he admires most, famous for his love for the poor, which Pope Francis is also known for. But his name is actually Jorge Bergoglio. Now, Jorge, that's a Spanish name, but Bergoglio is an Italian name. And so Jorge Bergoglio, Pope Francis, is the first pope to not be from Europe since there was a pope from Syria, but he was a European, he was a Roman, but he was from Syria, and this was like 1,000+ years ago. So he is the first pope to not be from Europe. Now he's European, every pope has been European, but he is the first pope to not be from Europe and to be from the Western Hemisphere ever. And so he's quite a big deal, but Jorge Bergoglio. And so he was a pope there, and there's actually inside of the cathedral, there's a lot of things that he used to use, vestments and that type of thing. And additionally, in the cathedral, there is the crypt or the mausoleum of José de San Martín. José de San Martín was an Argentine general, and they call him the liberator of Argentina, Chile, and Peru, because he was the principal leader who led the revolt against the Spanish rule during the Napoleonic era, when every Hispanic country here in the Western Hemisphere, except for Cuba and Puerto Rico, became independent from Spain. And he led the independence effort here in Argentina, as well as Chile and Peru. So he's kind of like the George Washington of the southern part of Hispanic America, you might say. And he is buried right there in that cathedral as well. A beautiful tomb. I saw it myself just a few days ago. Really lovely. Well, what else is there to say? Now, if we turn over this way, we'll walk this way here. Now, I forget the exact name of this structure. It's something like the Cabildo de Buenos Aires, something like that. But this was actually the colonial government building during the Spanish colonial period. And the very first Argentine Congress met here in this building, I do believe in 1810. So it's a very important building in Argentine history. A lot of important things happened there. Now, Argentina, as I'm sure you might know, Argentina was one of the wealthiest countries in the world for a brief period in the late 1800s, going into the early 1900s. But today, Argentina has some of the worst inflation in the world, and Argentina has the very dubious honor of, I do believe, being the only country that was considered developed and that is now transitioned to a developing country. So if you come here to Argentina, to Buenos Aires, you're going to see a lot of poverty, people digging through the trash, sleeping on the streets. You're going to see a lot of beautiful buildings built in that classic Southern European style, very reminiscent of Paris, or Rome, or Madrid, the great cities of Southern Europe, but they're in a state of horrible disrepair because they were built during Argentina's golden age in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. But now, in its modern state, they are reflective of that. Now, Argentina actually got the second most European immigrants of any country outside of Europe, other than, of course, the United States. Now, the United States received something like 40 million, 45 million, something like that, Europeans. But Argentina received, I think, it was 7 million Europeans. That's more than Canada. That's more than Australia. That's more than Brazil. Now, they came here because this is one of the largest countries on Earth. In fact, it's the 8th largest country on Earth. And it is incredibly fertile. The Pampas, which Buenos Aires is right in the middle of, are some of the most fertile pieces of farmland, whether it be for growing food or cattle or anything else. Some of the most fertile land in the entire world. And so Europeans, primarily from Italy and Spain, but also places like France and Portugal, came here to take advantage of this fertile farmland and, of course, the temperate climate. This is one of the only parts of the Americas, in addition, of course, to Chile, Uruguay, the southernmost part of Brazil, and, of course, the United States and Canada. This is one of the only parts of the Americas with a temperate climate, which Europeans like. You know, Europeans evolved in Europe, and Europe primarily has a temperate climate. And so the food, the clothing, the methods of agriculture are suited to a temperate climate and not a tropical climate. So Europeans prefer to move here instead of places like Colombia or Venezuela or Mexico. So anyway, however, after the good days, so when the Great Depression hit, Argentina implemented a lot of protectionist policies. They blocked the exports. They made it very difficult to export and to import, and it really tanked the economy. And then, after World War II, they elected a man named Perón. I forget his name, Juan Domingo Perón, that's his name, and wife Eva Perón, very famous because of the musical Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. But anyway, you'll see their faces all over Buenos Aires. Perón was a protectionist. He believed in big government. He got a ton of people working for the government. And ever since, Argentina has become addicted to big government. And the number of people employed in the public sector has been astronomical. And so, really, ever since Perón and the protectionism of the Great Depression, Argentina has been in basically a period of economic homeostasis, if not outright decline. Now, in this past 100 years or so since the Argentine Golden Age, they've had so many governments, dozens of presidents. One year they went through 6 presidents. They had a military dictatorship, well, multiple military dictatorships, but of course the most iconic one, or notorious one you might say, was the one that they're talking about today. They've had a series of left-wing governments where they've tried protectionism and nationalizing everything and everyone working for the government. Then they've tried right-wing governments where they privatize everything and everyone's supposed to work in the private sector. But because there's so much governmental inconsistency, foreign investors have never really wanted to loan money to the country or to invest in the country. And so now you see it in its declined state. Now in Argentina they have Javier Milei, who's right-wing. He is rapidly trying to cut the size and scope of government to bring back the economy, reduce inflation, and maybe he'll have some success in the short term, but almost certainly he'll be succeeded by a left-wing government that will just get rid of all the changes and bring back all of the things that led to hyperinflation and the problems in the first place. So I don't know, Argentina's star may have faded. Argentina suffers from brain drain. A lot of the intelligent and capable young people leave the country, and so unfortunately Argentina's best days are probably behind it. And accordingly, when Argentina had its golden age, that was when the country was the most European. Maybe 90%, if not more, of the country was European. But nowadays, it's probably more like 3/4. And most Europeans here have a non-insignificant amount of Amerindian admixture. And so the average intelligence quotient is lower than you would find in pretty much every other European country, whether even if Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, Ukraine. So yeah, it's unfortunately they're kind of the poor situation that they're in to an extent is baked into the cake and is likely not going to improve in the coming decades. But Argentina does have a higher standard of living than almost any other country in Latin America. And so it's a very attractive destination for migration from other parts of Latin America, for Bolivians, Paraguayans, Venezuelans. And so even though Argentina is in decline, it's not a bad place to live in comparison to places like Bolivia or Paraguay or Peru, which are much more Amerindian, much poorer than here in Argentina, even in its fallen state. And so, anyway, there's not much more I should say in this short video, but I must say I've really enjoyed my time here in Argentina, here in Buenos Aires. I've gone all over the province of Buenos Aires to places like La Plata. I was there a couple of days ago, and it really is such a beautiful place, inhabited by very friendly and, quite frankly, very attractive people. And it's just such a pleasure. I feel more at home. I've been to most of the countries of Hispanic America, and I feel more at home here, due to that European demography and European culture and European style, and of course the temperate climate. I feel more at home here than perhaps anywhere else I've been in Latin America. And so yeah, I really can't recommend it enough. I mean, it is on the other side of the world, so it is difficult to get to from North America or Europe, but if you ever have a chance, I of course highly recommend coming here to beautiful Argentina. Well, until next time, thank you very much. Ciao.